and welcome to the Voices of Boyle podcast. My name is Carlo Quartaro and this is the very first episode. Today I'm going to be chatting with Risteard Lloyd about his life-changing motorbike accident that he had back in June 2005 in Thailand. For those of you that may not know Risteard, he's a Boyle native and he's the son of Monica and Sean Lloyd. Risteard and myself have been friends since we were kids, so I thought it would be fitting that he would be the first guest to have on the podcast. We're going to chat about his life in the lead up to the accident, the day itself, and we're also going to chat about the road to recovery in the aftermath. It really is an eye-opening story and one that I hope you can get some inspiration from. Risteard, thanks very much for coming on and being on the show. Right, let's get straight into it. Your story centres around the date June the 11th, 2005, when you were involved in an horrific motorcycle accident on the island of Koh Samui, which is off the west coast of Thailand. Now, before we get into talking about that accident itself, can you give us some context as to the reason why you were over in Thailand in the first place on that date?
Quick synopsis is, started travelling when I was about 24. I was a long-distance truck driver, so I would work very hard, save all my money, apply for a visa, and then go travelling to experience life, cultures. And that was pretty much what I was doing before I was getting back to Thailand again for a third time. Or fourth time, and the accident then happened.
Right, yeah.
But that was the quick synopsis of my life.
Yeah, and were you, if I remember correctly, were you in India before you ended up in Thailand?
Yes, I had travelled out to India and I was living in India for about six and a half months. And then a friend of mine came out and met me in India, and he was on the way out to New Zealand. So he came and met me in India, and then I said, well, I'll tell you what, the two of us will go out to Thailand, and I'll head back home from Thailand and you can head on to New Zealand from Thailand. And that's why I went back to Thailand then for, I think it was the fourth time I was in Thailand.
At that stage?
At that stage, that was my fourth.
And so you went to Thailand and then you headed over to Koh Samui on the west coast?
West coast, yeah.
Okay. And so you were over there, were you planning at that stage on being over there for a while, or was it like just a quick trip?
It was just a quick trip. It was more just seeing off my friend Vinny. So it was just no thought process in it. It was just, where do you go or what do you experience? The usual crack. I never really put too much thought into exactly where I was going or what I was doing. It was more a case, but I got the feeling of in the coming days to it.
Yeah. So. The day of the accident, okay, obviously you don't remember anything about the accident that happened, but can you maybe, from what you found out afterwards, can you just give us a quick kind of recount of how you were found, where you were found, maybe the kind of the bits and bobs in between that?
The only recollection that I could ever have was being in Thailand and remember a few little small points prior to the accident. But the accident, as you just covered there, the only story that I know of it, what I was told and what was reported in the newspapers, was an individual had got lost and seen a bike lying in the middle of a gravel track in Koh Samui. They wouldn't have roads like we have here in Ireland, so it was a gravel track. He got just disorientated and was going up the road and seen my bike. So went to pick the bike up off the gravel track when he seen my feet sticking out of a ditch. So when he came over then to see me, he found me underwater. The back of my skull was opened and the side of my skull on the right side was opened and my brain was exposed and hanging out. My shoulders and clavicles was broken and my lungs were punctured where my bottom ribs had come up when I came off the bike and punctured my lungs. So when he seen blood coming out of my mouth, obviously thought I was dead. And my back was fairly damaged where I slid on the gravel. So naturally enough he thought, this doesn't look good, and got the police. And the police came and took me back to the hospital.
All right. So it was the police, you didn't have ambulances, or was it just the police?
I have absolutely no idea.
I know in Thailand maybe they kind of have a different kind of a system than, like we have here, obviously ambulances and that.
Yeah.
They might necessarily have, especially back in 2005, things might have been a little different. So this guy who had got lost on that road miraculously just came across you in the ditch. Now, you said in an article that you wrote that if he hadn't found you then and it was an hour or two later, that there's a good chance you would have drowned because the water in the ditch was kind of coming up to your nose at that stage.
Yes.
Is that because... I think in June, I think it's rainy season in Thailand, so there'll be the wet season. So there's probably a good chance when you get them deluges of rain.
Monsoons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty mental though when you think about that. It's an hour or two and you wouldn't be here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you were taken into the hospital, and then how did your family get informed? Like,
as I always say, when anybody asks me about this, I never carried email addresses, or I never wrote down phone numbers. Just could always remember them, thankfully. But for whatever reason, none other than there was angels on my shoulders, when they were trying to figure out who I was, in my right pocket, my home house number was found with the code in front of it. To this day, it still bamboozles me how it got there, because I never carried numbers. But for whatever reason, it was in, and that's how they contacted my mother and father and let them know on the 11th of June 2005.
Yeah, because I actually remember Siobhan, your sister, coming into my mum and the chipper that night, would have been late, and saying that Risteard was in a very bad accident over in Thailand and they didn't know were you going to make it or not. I always remember that night. So obviously the trauma that they must have felt hearing that you were in a crazy accident over on the other side of the world.
Yes.
Their immediate response was obviously, we all have to get out there. And so they came out to you then for a period of weeks, or was it a month or something?
Yes, the whole family had to get emergency passports, well, 2 of them anyway, and get out, because this was all spurring on them in quick time. So the whole family had to come out because they didn't know, was anybody else involved? Did I take anybody else's life, or where it happened, or the nature of it? All they knew, which was very, very little at the time, was that I had a motorbike accident. They also knew that I had undergone brain surgery at that stage, and I had also gone on another surgery for my back and lungs, and I was on a life support machine, but they were told they didn't know how long I was going to last on the life support machine. So, as anybody can try to imagine what that flight was, and all the thoughts and just possibilities going through their head, and for the length of the flight, I don't think anybody be ever able to understand the trauma and the traumaticness of it.
So they came over to Koh Samui and they spent how long was it? About
a month, I think. Okay. As time frames for me now was only what was told to me, so I think it was just over a month. Okay,
and then obviously you had to figure out getting back home to Ireland. So yes. That would have meant getting from Koh Samui, possibly Bangkok.
Yes.
From Bangkok then to Dublin, or was there another?
Yeah. It was. It went Koh Samui up to Bangkok, then to Charles de Gaulle, because there was no direct flight into Ireland, and then from Charles de Gaulle into Dublin Airport.
Right, and then so you went straight into a hospital in Dublin?
Yeah, they had thankfully people that was aware of the situation back in Ireland had an ambulance, because I had to fly on my own on the flight. Well, when I say on my own, meaning no normal passengers with it. There was my family, a doctor and nurses there, just in case I came out of sedation on flight, that I could be a problem. So I had to fly in first class and coming back into Charles de Gaulle, and then the same into Dublin. And they had an ambulance waiting for me at the airport to be taken directly straight to, I think it was Dunleary first, or Beaumont. No, it was Beaumont first, sorry. And then that was just to assess the situation and see was the cabin pressure going to be, has it affected me in any way at all.
Yeah. And obviously then you're in Beaumont, obviously you have no recollection of that time period, I presume.
No, not at all, nothing.
How long were you in Beaumont that you can...
I think I was told we were there for about a month, but the strain was starting to take its toll on the families, and the fact that we're from the west of Ireland, was kind of really starting to take its toll. So they were trying to speak with people about getting me moved down to Sligo, because from the demographics of the situation.
And were they going up and down every day, or were they staying up there for...
I think they had to stay with me. I needed constant care and constant attention, so I couldn't be left on my own by any stretch of the imagination at all. I had to be constantly under care and supervised.
Yeah, because there's in that article that you wrote, and I'll link to it in the show notes, is a different light, but a new light.
Yes.
Which is a brilliant article that everyone should read. That you go into detail about that whole time frame. But there's one picture in that article, and it's of you, your mum, and your dad, and it's a very strong photo because at that stage you didn't recognize anyone.
No.
And your dad's head is just kind of down on his shoulders, and it's a very strong image, like of, you know, they didn't know back then, were you even going to recognize them again?
Absolutely. They were told, worst case scenario, I suppose, but because of the severity of my injuries, they were told, he'll be lucky if he knows who you are in 5 years. You'll be very, very lucky, such as the extremities of his injuries. So that was hard to take, because it's not just one individual that's going through an ABI, that's acquired brain injury. It's the whole family, and then friends, and then all the staff that are trying to deal with it, because everybody is so differently affected. So,
yeah, it's you can only imagine though how a family must feel in that instance, because not knowing is their son or their daughter going to come out of that, and just seeing them then being confused on a day-to-day basis. So from what they've told you, can you tell us, were there any instances what, like, you know, they come in to see you wouldn't recognise them, you'd say get out of the room, or was it any? Yeah, it
was quite a while. I'd say nearly a year. It was nearly a year before I started to recognise, and sometimes I could say, hi Dad, how are you? Within 2 seconds, who are you? Who are you? I don't recognise you. Who are you? Get out of my room. So the confusion was just plaguing me, because you have no idea, absolutely no idea whatsoever, of what's going on or anything around in your surroundings. And whatever is in your mind for a few seconds, it's literally gone out like a breeze, a feather floating through the wind.
Yeah, it must have been so hard though for your parents to go through that, and the rest of your family, of course. Yeah. So you were moved to Sligo General, and you spent a period of 3 months, I think, in Sligo General. Yeah,
thereabouts. Yeah. You know, as I was saying, a lot of it is guesswork. I think it was 3 to 4 months.
And during that time, you started to, of course, like when people don't know, but you had to actually learn how to chew food again, stuff like that. You had to learn how to
walk.
Yeah, how to walk and all. Like,
yeah, I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to regain balance. My parents would have to show my brain by moving my chin up and down and explain to me how to chew food, because I didn't have the capacity or the understanding. So there were a lot of hardships and a lot of frustrations, and then the fact I wasn't remembering who they were was harder on top of the trauma they were dealing with, the everyday occupational therapy. So yeah, it was a hard 6 months for them.
So was that 6 months in Sligo General?
I think so, yeah.
Right, okay.
But doing occupational therapist and that.
Yeah.
Occupational therapy was kind of always.
And then you came back home for a stint. And
a little stint, yeah.
And then you went back to the rehabilitation training unit?
Well, I was taken out of the hospital for only a few hours at a time to see, could I remember anything about my hometown? Could I remember anything about the roadway, getting home? And then back to the hospital. Constant care, constant supervision. And then I was moved when I was assessed because of the severity of the rehabilitation. I had to be moved up to Dunleary, the rehabilitation hospital. So I went from Sligo directly to that.
St. Pat's, isn't it?
St. Pat's, yeah. And I was there for possibly about 2 months. I think 2 or 3 months before I was then being assessed constantly, and Mum and Dad and family were coming up at the weekends then to visit me.
In St. Pat's, you're amongst other people that have brain injuries.
Yes.
And you would probably be looking at them, and you were on the road to recovery at this stage. You were starting to be able to like read maps and Connect 4 and things like that.
Yeah, basic games, yeah.
But how did it impact you when you started to realise that you had an accident? Or I know you probably didn't even realise back then exactly what had happened, that you maybe had a fall. But how did it impact you seeing other people there with other brain injuries and you're amongst them? Did that affect you in that you were thinking, Christ, this is am I like that? Am I confused as they are? Am I worse? Am I, did that
Yes,
impact you?
that's a very good question, because everybody is so differently affected by it. And yes, I was kind of going, geez, I'm not that bad. Geez, I'm not that bad at all. But deep down, really deep down, if I was able to have the insight of that, which I didn't, when I was looking, I knew there was an awful lot of things wrong with me. And I couldn't quite figure it out. And you'd be very confused. What happened to me? What happened? Did I fall off a ladder? Or where, no son, you had a fall, you hurt your head, you're all right though, was what was being said to me. But I think deep down, I knew I was going to have a long, long road. And even though I was making progress in very, very basic games, like, as you were saying, Connect 4, a few others, even Snap, all to try and invoke a thought process and see, could I interpret, could I assess, could I see? But yeah, it was hard, and it was impacting me,
At what stage did you was your short-term memory, or was it your long-term memory, or both, that was equally affected?
At that stage, both. At that stage, both. Really and truly, I couldn't hold on to any thought process at all. And I knew there was things seriously wrong as regards of what had happened, but I didn't have the insight to know what it was. This is the best I can say it. But deep down, I knew I had serious problems.
For someone that was when you didn't recognise anyone, you probably don't remember, but obviously if two people were coming into the room and telling you they were your parents, and you were so confused that you didn't know they were your parents, or one minute you did and the next minute you didn't, do you actually have any recollection of that happening? As in, or did you feel confused, or did you have no recollection?
No recollection at all. Yeah. No recollection at all. I mean, we know now because of what was discussed, and thankfully that we can, I know it sounds a bit strange, but we laugh and joke about it, because at the time it was just utter trauma. It was just sheer trauma. But now, because of this long journey to get to where I am, we look back and a few smiles, some tears, but some smiles as well, going, but you didn't remember anything, Risteard, so maybe that's why you've healed as much as you've healed, is because you had no memory, that you're not carrying the baggage of that mental hurt. So,
looking back, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, how do you feel about Thailand? Like, a lot of people that had a traumatic experience in a country, as you had, some of them would have a very negative association with that country, like, oh, I'd never go back there again, even though you can't remember anything. How do you feel about Thailand?
I have absolutely no problem with Thailand at all, because this was self-inflicted. Thankfully, though, it wasn't through alcohol or speed that I came off the bike. We don't actually know how or why to this day, and we're not trying to figure it out. We've just accepted it. Well, rather, I've just accepted it. So it's not the fault of Thailand. But people asked me before, would I go back? And I think the only thing that would stop me is I'd be afraid I'd have a wash with memory thoughts that had hit me, and it might be too much for me to be able to handle. So I'd take myself out of the situation as opposed to put myself into it. But I don't really have any negative thoughts against Thailand or anything like that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I suppose, they saved your life in that
yes,
way.
Yes, absolutely.
That immediate surgery.
Absolutely.
But yeah, because it is interesting, because a lot of people that have had accidents in certain countries or places would never want to go back there. For the same reason you just said, it might trigger some emotions or some reflective memory that they mightn't be able to deal with, or just wouldn't want to even put themselves in that position. After you started, I think it was in 2008 or 2007 even, that you started to kind of gain a bit more of your own independence.
Yes.
You had recovered sufficiently enough that you wanted to move into your own apartment, you wanted to have your own independence in that way. How was that how did you feel then?
An ABI survivor feels, if he can remember something, or she can remember something for 10-15 minutes, you're fine, there's nothing wrong, everything is fine. The problems are deeper within your mind because of the recovery and the rehabilitation. So I was convinced that I was grand. I was also convinced that I was able to go back to work, whereas everybody was telling me, you can't, you won't, you can't. So I had to go and do all the assessments for car, truck, everything again, redo my licenses, to see was I corpus mentis, which I did. And because I was gaining good scores and good results in all my occupational therapy and my physical activity, my mental activity, my personal development, I felt I was making progress. So everybody that's going through ABI, and I say everybody as a whole, has to make their own acceptance with it as well. So step by step, some were harder to let go than others. But I was feeling good and feeling confident, but even though every day was a training cycle.
A challenge, yeah.
A challenge, yeah.
Did you have any inclination of going back to work, picking up some kind of work, doing courses? What was that process?
I was looing to get back to work because I got such great reports when I had done the truck test and the assessment that said this man hasn't lost any of his cognitive ability. This man was able to achieve every obstacle that was put for him. So straight away that gave me the confidence. So I decided to go back truck driving. In the first day behind the wheel of a truck while I was on the road, the metaphorical sledgehammer came down and hit me on the back of the head. You cannot do this anymore. You know deep down you're not able to do it. You can't remember what you've been told where to go. You can't remember what load is on the back of your trailer. So you need to realise that and take a step back. But I had to do that myself, as opposed to somebody else telling me, no, you won't be able to do it.
You had to see.
I had to figure that pathway out myself, which I did.
And that would obviously been a bit of a gunk for you to kind of realise that, you can't do what you loved doing prior to the accident.
Yeah.
Did you take up any courses, or did you?
Yeah, knew that at that stage I was slowly but surely, as each 6 months went on to a year and a half, 2 years, I was kind of going, okay, you can't sit at home sitting on the couch staring at the four walls feeling sorry for yourself. You need to get up and see, is there anything you can do to help you re-educate as well as rehabilitate? So I went back and looked into doing courses, and I decided to attend the National Learning Network in Sligo, doing office skills, computer applications and business management, which I found very, very hard, but sheer grit determination, bit by bit, and the course, the way it was set and the pace of it, was able to get it bit by bit and start to achieve high scores in it.
Over the course of the years after your accident as well, you were doing some speaking at different events. Would that be kind of inspirational speaking, or was it kind of more of they wanted you to talk about your accident, or as a kind of like a brain injury survivor kind of a talk?
A bit of both. When people look at me, they could never figure out the extremities of the accident I've had. It's very, very hard to comprehend because I don't have any physical scars. So when I was asked to go speaking, it was about more the severity of the accident. And this is what happens when you have an accident, and how you have to rebuild your life and around it. So I was doing inspirational speaking and saying, when you think of it, I was a highly trained professional driver who had driven all over Europe in a truck, as well as a lot of places around the world. But I still had an accident that nearly killed me. You're not invincible. So we were always trying to hit the age group of between 16 to 18 year olds.
Yeah.
And that's what we were aiming for, called Just One Life. And we'd have members of the emergency response unit, the fire brigade, the police, the accident and emergency, and the ambulance crew, the first responders. And we'd all be speaking and showing photos. And then people like me would get up and explain, as the accidenters that had the accident, what it's done, how it's impacted our lives, what we have to live with, what we're doing with.
It's impressive as well because, not everyone would feel comfortable enough to get up on a stage in front of a room full of people and maybe even talk, public speaking kind of a job. But to get up and speak about a traumatic experience like that you've overcome, it's not everyone that would probably have the confidence to do that.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And there's a lot of people that have been so differently affected, because everybody, with the stories I've heard and the people I've met, everybody has been so differently affected. So there's no two stories that are the same. And the confidence I got on it is because of the work it's taken me to get to where I am, hard slog, for want of a better terminology. I thought if my story can help others, other families, or maybe just raise the awareness of what happens with an ABI or any kind of an accident or trauma in your life for that matter, and just show, okay, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it, you know, and so on and so forth with it. So, yeah, I've just been very, very lucky. But I try to explain to people when I'm giving my speeches that this has been an uphill struggle every day, and it's not something like, oh, you're grand now, away you go, everything is fine. Constant rehabilitation, and has been for 17 years.
If someone was to say to you, are you the same Risteard now that you are before the accident? Obviously, a lot has changed and has gone different paths, but would you say fundamentally you're the same person, or are you different in a specific way as a result? And if so, what would them changes be that you'd say you're not the same person as you were prior to 11th of June 2005?
Very good question, because, you know, you've had such a drastic change from the way you used to be to what you are. There's a lot that has changed as regards of, you know, what my ability is. Personality, thankfully, has stayed the same, because I certainly look at life very, very differently now. I'm much more appreciative of the simple things around me, because I can appreciate them. I'd say the hardest part of recovery for any ABI survivor out there, and this is what I'm always trying to say in speeches as well, one of the hardest parts is acceptance. So, of course, that you'd have had serious change in your life, and you have to live with that and not fight against it, but try to harmonise and work with it. And that's what I've been doing. So there's a lot of my personality that's still the same as it was post-injury. But there's, unfortunately, the fatigue levels when it comes to work has been the major change since the accident. Yeah, I remember you saying that. The other thing you did say to me as well years ago that always stood with me, you said that you would never change what happened if you could, because it's made you into the person you are today. Mm-hmm. That obviously still holds true. Still stands, yeah. I think, we all have pathways in life that we have to follow, however they manifest. So it's not what happens in your life, it's what we take from it. And I have taken off an awful lot of good from the accident, because, number one, I've went and re-educated myself with many different courses, many different personal development courses, many different things. If somebody had told me pre-accident that I'd be up giving inspirational speeches to between 2,000 and 3,000 people in a hallway, I go, no. But, so I've tried to take the good out of it. And that's why I wouldn't change what's happened, because we can't change the past, we just have to live with the present. And that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I think a lot of good has come from it, as opposed to the bad. And present day, have you any checkups, or do you have to do any sort of continual rehab, or is there you don't do any of that anymore? No, thankfully. That's brilliant. Thankfully, I don't have to do any of that, and I don't have to get assessed or anything like that. But I'm always kind of working with the idea that you can't push yourself too hard. You have to know your limitations. So I don't put myself in positions where I will get too fatigued, or I let myself get too hungry, because I just don't function. I'm just one of the very, very lucky ones that I don't have to go into any appointments or things like that, or be assessed for anything. But that's 17 years to get to this stage. And when I'm being honest with anybody, in all honesty, it was really close to 10 years that realisation of the drastic changes in your life had kind of set in, and go, okay, this is what we're doing now. This is the way we're living. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, I'm saying it in a positive way. But I've used all the positives from it, nothing but good. So I'm very, very lucky. I was curious, had you any inkling to go travelling after? Like, have you even been abroad? I don't know, did I ask you that? I haven't been abroad, but I have to take the funniness out of it. We were going over to England. I know that's not abroad, but I was still getting a plane, and I was so excited going over to Liverpool for a weekend. When was this? This was in 2010. Okay. So this was 5 years after the accident. I was all looking forward to it. But maybe times weren't right, because A volcano erupted in the Northern Hemisphere and stopped all flights. I thought, okay, so I'm not ready to go fly just yet. That's a sign, so I'll stay for another while.
And so you haven't actually left the country?
I haven't been out of the country yet.
Okay, and in the future, do you have any, like, I don't mean travelling, but would you just say like to even go, for example, Spain, France somewhere for a weekend? Would that interest you?
Yeah,
or is it?
I would.
Yeah.
I would like just, I suppose for one side of it, Carlo, to see that I could do it. You know, that I'd have no problem being outside of my comfort circle, for want of a better terminology.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely not a no-no.
Yeah, no, because I wasn't sure, did I ask you that a few years ago, or that was when I was talking to you about it, but I wasn't sure, and I was thinking, I wonder, have you? Because, you know, like myself, you love to travel, and you were in a lot of countries around the world, seeing the different cultures, and I just thought, would you have that urge still in you, even though after what you've said, you know, you have to make do with what life has thrown at you, and I suppose you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That's
And
the main thing.
yeah, I'd love to do it again, and thankfully, touch wood, a lot of the memories in long term have stayed with me. So for all the places that I did get to experience and learn about, it wasn't taken away from me through the accident. So I'm very, very happy that they're there, and because of that, there's always a little bit of inclination to go, someday, someday.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not kind of, no, I can't ever leave the country again, or I can't ever leave the town, or whatever, as soon as an opportunity presents itself.
I suppose as well, a concern would be for how your parents would, like, how would they feel? Because I presume, obviously, with what they went through, is going to stay with them, obviously, for the rest of their lives. And if you would turn around to them tomorrow and say, I'm off now for a couple of weeks, I'm going off over to Portugal or whatever, they would, I'd say, naturally be very, very concerned and nervous, which is understandable.
It's totally understandable, and there's something that I haven't mentioned through this interview yet as well. Every decision I make now, every decision I'm making has to involve the family, and that's not,
of course,
anything other than out of respect. It's not a protective thing, because we all went through it together. So I'd be always saying, if I was going down south, so listen, you're all right, I'm heading down to Cork just for the weekend, just to let you know that I'll be all right, something like that, and see, are they comfortable? Because it's important, out of respect, to put their feelings into the picture as well before you go off and do it. And that would be the exact same thing with leaving the country, of course,
Yeah. And just going back to when you were recovering and you kind of fully understood that something wasn't, you had a fall or you had an accident, whatever, how did you deal with the negative thoughts that undoubtedly you would have had during that time? Like, waking up days, with the weather being bad here and all that kind of stuff. It must have been just absolutely gut-wrenching for you to kind of come to the terms with, you are an ABI survivor, you're going through this recovery period. Like, it must have been very difficult for you to, feel those emotions and frustration, I presume, as well.
Yeah, 100%. They say that one of the major things that can come from this kind of an accident and this traumatic experience in your life could be a mild depression, or could even go as far as going deep, because you've had such drastic changes in your life and trying to deal with that, and as well as watching everybody around you trying to deal with it as well. So there's a lot in it, and thankfully for me, I never found it as depression, that it was utter frustration. It was just fell under the category of frustration. But bit by bit, I was always saying to myself, with every year that passed, I'm getting a little better now.
Yeah.
Getting a little better. Not pushing myself, not kind of trying to set unachievable goals, because that would have its own negative impact on my mental energy or my mental ability.
Of course it would.
If I was setting up unrealistic goals that I wasn't going to be able to achieve, and then having to deal with that. So I was trying to set myself achievable goals, and then was getting better in my mental awareness and mental well-being because of that, and dealing with the frustration of it.
Yeah. You've come through one of the most traumatic experiences that someone could have in their life, a brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to someone that was going through something similar, or even going through a tough time in their life, and they couldn't see a kind of a way out of it. Would you have any bits of advice to give to someone that would?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's very, very important for you to accept your situation. Right? That's easier said than done. It's not something you can read out of a book. You know, my advice to anybody is, which is what I done, I went and I spoke with a counsellor about dealing with the changes in my life. So I would definitely advise to somebody, because all the services are there. Everything is there to help you, but you have to look for them, you know. So my advice to anybody who's going through anything similar, I'm not saying that one person's case is worse or better than anyone else, because it's all a trauma. So if you feel the need to be able to talk to somebody about it, is to go and talk to somebody about it. There is nothing but help out there. And my advice is always know that there's never a road without a turning, that things will get better. You don't see it at the start, but if you keep bit by bit taking baby steps towards it, you will be able to reach the achievement at the end of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's about just having the foresight to see that the light will come.
Mm-hmm.
What haven't I asked that I should have?
Well, not really. I mean, I'm very, very happy with where I am in life at the moment. And because I won't let it get under my skin too much and go, oh, why is this? Because I hear and see things in the news that are 10 times worse. And I always try to say it's not about what's worse or what's better. I'm just trying to take each day as it comes with a smile on my face. And when I'm getting into my car, the fact that I'm able to drive it, when I'm able to cook a dinner and sit down and enjoy the simplest things. I just get such joy out of simple things. Even just going for a drive or a sunset. It smiles in my heart and my heart smiles back.
Listen, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So that's it for this episode, folks. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you like the content, we'd really appreciate it if you could share it. You can follow us on Facebook by searching for Voices of Boyle, and you can also contact us on our website by visiting voicesofboyle.com. We're always looking for new guests, so if you'd like to be on the show, or if you know someone who you'd like to join us, please reach out to us via our Facebook page or website. Thanks very much, and we'll chat to you again soon.